3 decades, one country. The fastest transformation in economic history. In 1978, China's economy was smaller than Italy's. Most people lived in rural villages. Factories were outdated. Income per person was barely a few $100s a year. For centuries, China had been one of the world's great civilizations, and for nearly 100 years, one of its poorest major nations. Today, China is the world's second largest economy. It dominates global manufacturing. It leads in electric vehicles, batteries, solar power, high-speed rail, and increasingly advanced technology. Hundreds of millions of people moved from extreme poverty into the middle class in a single generation. This wasn't luck. It wasn't cheap labor alone. And it definitely wasn't free markets magically fixing everything. What happened in China follows a pattern, a strategy refined across East Asia and executed at a scale the world had never seen before. To understand how China became the next economic superpower, we need to rewind not just to the 1970s, but to the deeper systems that shaped how Chinese leaders think about growth, power, and long-term planning. For over 2,000 years, Chinese governance was built around one idea: stability through order, discipline, and capable administration. Ancient Chinese dynasties didn't rely on charisma. They relied on bureaucracy. Exam selected officials. Long-term plans managed irrigation, food storage, roads, and taxation across massive territories. While Europe was fragmented into competing kingdoms, China was already practicing centralized economic coordination. That institutional memory never disappeared. So when the Communist Party took power in 1949, it didn't just inherit a country. It inherited a civilization used to long-range planning and state-led coordination. Early experiments failed badly. Central planning caused massive inefficiencies and tragic famines. By the 1970s, China was stuck, too rigid to grow, too poor to modernize. Then came the turning point. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping made a radical decision. China would keep political control, but unleash market forces inside a carefully guided system. Not chaos. Not full capitalism. Controlled experimentation. The government created special economic zones along the coast, places where foreign companies could invest, factories could operate freely, and profits could be reinvested. Shenzhen, once a fishing village of 30,000 people, became a metropolis of over 10 million. But here's the key part most people miss. China didn't just invite foreign companies to build cheap factories. It used them as classrooms. Western firms brought machinery, management systems, logistics, and technology. Chinese workers learned everything: how supply chains functioned, how quality control worked, how exports scaled. At first, China assembled toys, clothes, and electronics for foreign brands. Then it started making parts. Then components, then entire products. This wasn't accidental. The government deliberately pushed domestic firms to climb what economists call the value chain, moving from low-skill production to higher technology, higher profit industries. Cheap manufacturing was just the entry point. Exports became the engine. Instead of producing only for China's poor domestic market, factories sold to the entire world. Billions of customers instead of millions. That scale allowed massive investment in machinery, ports, highways, and power grids. Every dollar earned from exports bought more advanced equipment. Better equipment produced better goods. Better goods increased exports. Round and round it went, faster every year. Between 1978 and 2010, China's economy grew nearly 10% annually for over 3 decades straight. That kind of growth sustained over that long is almost unheard of in human history. But growth alone doesn't create a superpower. Structure does. China didn't leave development to chance. The state directed credit through massive government-controlled banks. It chose priority industries. It protected young firms until they became globally competitive. Steel, electronics, shipbuilding, telecommunications, renewable energy, semiconductors. Companies that performed received funding and support. Companies that failed lost access and disappeared. It was ruthless but effective. This created fierce competition inside industries that mattered most for long-term power. At the same time, China invested heavily in education. Universities expanded. Engineers were trained by the millions. Science and technology became national priorities. A poor farming nation transformed into the world's largest pool of technical talent. And there was another massive advantage: density. China built industrial clusters where thousands of specialized suppliers operated within hours of each other. A phone factory could source screens, chips, casings, and batteries nearby. Problems were solved fast. Production scaled instantly. This is why China became known as the world's factory. But factories were never the final goal. They were the launch pad. By the 2010s, China was no longer just assembling Western products. It was building its own brands, its own technology, its own global supply chains. High-speed rail faster than anywhere on Earth. The world's largest electric vehicle industry. Leading solar panel production. Advanced AI research. China had moved from copier to competitor, and increasingly to leader. And it did all of this within one generation. From rural poverty to global power. From isolation to central hub of world trade. From economic backwater to superpower. But there's one deeper reason this transformation happened so fast and why many other developing countries failed trying to copy it. It comes down to institutions, culture, and long-term coordination. And that's where the real story of China's rise becomes even more powerful. In the next part, we'll break down why China's system could execute massive plans while others stalled. How trust in government direction shaped investment behavior, and why copying China's strategy is far harder than it looks. Because China didn't just grow fast. It built an engine of development that keeps accelerating. What truly separated China from most developing countries wasn't just growth rates. It was execution. Many nations had access to foreign investment. Many tried industrial policy. Many talked about modernization. Very few could actually coordinate millions of workers, thousands of companies, trillions of dollars of capital, and decades-long national goals at the same time. China could. And the reason goes back to how its institutions were built. While Western economies rely heavily on private banks, stock markets, and short-term profit signals, China built a financial system designed to serve national strategy first. The country's largest banks are state-controlled. Their job isn't simply to maximize quarterly profits. Their job is to fund development. When Beijing decides an industry matters, high-speed rail, renewable energy, semiconductors, housing, infrastructure, credit flows toward it on a massive scale. This allows China to do something most countries can't. It can invest huge amounts of money for long periods without panicking when returns take time. Building ports, highways, power grids, industrial parks, and research centers doesn't pay off in 1 year. Sometimes it takes a decade. In market systems, those projects often struggle to attract funding. In China, the state simply funds them. That long-term patience created the physical backbone of growth. By the early 2000s, China had built more highways than the United States. Its ports became the busiest in the world. Its power generation expanded faster than any country in history. Factories weren't limited by poor logistics or unreliable electricity. Everything was designed for scale. And scale changes everything. When production becomes massive, costs fall. Efficiency rises. Innovation accelerates. Entire industries become globally competitive. But infrastructure alone isn't enough. China also built a unique relationship between government and business. Instead of treating companies as completely independent actors, the state acted like a strategic partner. Officials met regularly with corporate leaders. Targets were set. Problems were identified. Support was given, but performance was expected. If a company succeeded, it expanded rapidly. If it failed, financing dried up. This created intense pressure to improve constantly. Not comfort, not complacency. Relentless upgrading. Firms that once made simple plastic goods were pushed to adopt automation. Textile producers moved into advanced materials. Electronics assemblers became component designers. The entire economy was nudged upward step by step. Another key factor was land and housing policy. Local governments in China control land use. They lease land to developers and businesses, using the revenue to fund infrastructure, subways, schools, and industrial zones. As cities grew, this created a powerful feedback loop. Urbanization attracted workers. Workers fueled factories. Factories raised incomes. Higher incomes boosted housing demand. Land revenue funded more development. Round and round it went. In just 40 years, China urbanized over 600 million people, the largest migration in human history. Villages became megacities. Farmland turned into manufacturing hubs. Entire regions transformed economically within a single decade. This urban concentration supercharged productivity. Workers moved from low-output agriculture into high-output industrial and service jobs. Skills improved. Wages rose. Consumption expanded. Growth fed on itself. But perhaps the most misunderstood advantage China had was social coordination. Large-scale national projects require public buy-in. Roads cut through neighborhoods. Factories relocate communities. Cities are rebuilt almost overnight. In many democracies, these plans stall for years in legal battles and political gridlock. In China, once a decision is made, it happens. Fast. This speed gave China a massive edge during globalization. While other countries debated port expansions, China built dozens. While others argued over power plants, China connected entire regions. While others struggled with permitting, China rolled out infrastructure at breathtaking pace. Time itself became an economic weapon, and it allowed China to absorb global manufacturing faster than any competitor. As multinational companies searched for efficient supply chains, China offered something no one else could: massive scale, improving quality, reliable logistics, and supportive local governments. Factories flocked in. Technology flowed in. Skills transferred in. The learning curve compressed dramatically. China didn't take centuries to industrialize. It did it in decades. But execution wasn't just about authority. It was about incentives. Local officials were promoted based largely on economic performance. Faster growth, better infrastructure, rising incomes. These were career boosters. This turned regional governments into development machines. Every province competed to attract investment. Every city raced to build industrial parks. Every district looked for ways to upgrade industries. Growth wasn't abstract policy. It was personal career survival. That competitive pressure multiplied effort across the entire country. Instead of one central planner doing everything, millions of officials experimented, copied successful models, and scaled what worked. Successful cities became blueprints for others. Failures were abandoned quickly. China evolved through constant trial and error. Pragmatic, not ideological. If something worked, it spread. If it failed, it disappeared. This flexible experimentation is one of the hidden engines of China's rise. But there's still one deeper layer beneath all this. Why were people willing to save so much, work so intensely, invest so patiently, and accept long-term sacrifice for future prosperity? Why did education explode in importance? Why did families push relentlessly for skills and advancement? That answer lies in culture, values, and social expectations, forces just as powerful as policy. And once you understand them, China's transformation makes even more sense. Because economic systems don't run on money alone, they run on people. And in the next part, we'll uncover the cultural engine that powered one of the fastest rises in human history. Behind the factories, highways, and skyscrapers was something even more powerful: human behavior shaped by long-term thinking. Economic strategy can build roads. It can direct capital. But it can't force millions of families to sacrifice today for a better future, unless the culture already supports it. And this is where China's rise becomes impossible to separate from its social values. For thousands of years, Chinese society placed extraordinary importance on education, discipline, and upward mobility through effort. Imperial China selected officials through brutal exams that tested knowledge, memory, and endurance. Passing meant prestige, security, and influence for your entire family. Failing meant returning to poverty. Generations grew up believing that hard study was the main path to a better life. That belief never disappeared. When modern China opened its economy, the same mindset transferred directly into schooling, skills, and careers. Families poured everything into education. Parents worked extra jobs to pay for tutoring. Students studied late into the night. Universities expanded at breathtaking speed. By the 2000s, China was graduating more engineers each year than the United States and Europe combined. Not just more students, more technically trained workers ready to operate machines, design systems, and absorb new technologies. This created something rare in development, a massive skilled labor force arriving exactly when industrialization demanded it. But education was only part of the story. Equally important was saving. Chinese households saved an enormous share of their income, often 30 to 40%. That wasn't because life was easy. It was because uncertainty was high and long-term security mattered. Savings funded investment. Investment funded factories. Factories created jobs. Jobs increased income. And rising income allowed even more saving. Once again, the cycle reinforced itself. In many countries, consumer spending dominates. In China, capital formation dominated. Money flowed into building capacity instead of instant consumption. That allowed China to scale faster than almost any economy in history. There was also a powerful collective mindset at work. While Western societies emphasize individual success and personal freedom, Chinese society historically emphasized family reputation, group responsibility, and shared progress. Success wasn't just yours. It lifted your parents, your siblings, your extended family. That created enormous motivation to endure hard work and long hours for future stability. Factories ran around the clock. Workers migrated across provinces. Entire families reorganized their lives around opportunity. This wasn't forced labor. It was voluntary ambition driven by hope. People believed that sacrifice today truly led to a better tomorrow because they could see it happening all around them. Villages turned into cities. Poor households moved into apartments. Children entered universities their parents could never have imagined. Progress felt real. And when people believe effort pays off, productivity explodes. China also developed a culture of rapid learning and adaptation. Instead of resisting foreign methods, firms studied them. Instead of protecting outdated processes, they copied best practices and improved them. Western manufacturing techniques, Japanese quality control, German engineering discipline, American logistics systems. China absorbed everything, then optimized it. Factories constantly upgraded equipment. Managers streamlined workflows. Workers improved precision. Mistakes were corrected quickly. Speed of improvement became a competitive advantage. This is why China didn't stay at low-quality production for long. Early products were cheap and basic. Within years, quality surged. Within decades, China was producing advanced electronics, machinery, and technology. And all of this happened within dense industrial ecosystems. Workers moved between firms, carrying knowledge with them. Suppliers learned from major manufacturers. Manufacturers pushed suppliers to improve. Skills spread rapidly across entire regions. Innovation didn't happen in isolated labs. Once scale was achieved, costs dropped so low that foreign competitors struggled to survive. China didn't just participate in global markets. It reshaped them. And none of this would have worked without a population willing to commit to long-term progress. Institutions provided direction. Policy provided capital. Yet even with all these advantages, China's rise didn't just transform itself. It transformed the entire global economy. Supply chains shifted. Prices fell. Manufacturing power relocated. And geopolitical influence followed economic strength. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. How China's economic transformation rewrote the global balance of power, and why its rise now shapes everything from technology to trade to international politics. That's where the story becomes truly global. When China's economy took off, it didn't just lift one country. It rewired the world. Factories across North America and Europe closed as production shifted east. Prices for everyday goods collapsed. Entire industries reorganized around Chinese supply chains. From smartphones to furniture to clothing, China became the central node of global manufacturing. But something even bigger happened. Economic power began translating into geopolitical influence. Trade routes expanded. Ports were built across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Infrastructure projects connected regions that had been disconnected for centuries. Chinese companies invested abroad. Chinese technology spread globally. As China's economy grew, so did its leverage. Countries that traded heavily with China adjusted policies to maintain access. Nations that relied on Chinese manufacturing integrated deeper into its supply networks. Economic gravity slowly shifted. For the first time in over a century, a non-Western country was reshaping global commerce at scale. And unlike past empires built on military conquest, China's rise was built primarily on production, infrastructure, and trade. This is what makes China's transformation so historically unusual. It didn't conquer markets, it outcompeted them. Lower costs, faster scaling, relentless upgrading. Over time, that advantage compounded. Entire sectors became dominated by Chinese firms. Solar manufacturing, battery production, consumer electronics, shipping, steel. Once China achieved massive scale, its prices fell so low that competitors struggled to survive. Economic dominance became structural, and with structure comes staying power. But perhaps the most remarkable part of China's rise is how quickly it happened. In historical terms, nations usually take centuries to industrialize. Britain took over 100 years. The United States took nearly a century. Japan compressed the process into a few decades. China compressed it even further, across a population of more than 1 billion people. From widespread rural poverty to global economic powerhouse in one generation. That speed wasn't accidental. It was the result of deliberate strategy layered on top of deep cultural foundations. Strong institutions that could plan long-term, massive investment in infrastructure and skills. Export-driven growth that forced constant improvement. Dense industrial clusters that accelerated learning. A population willing to sacrifice today for tomorrow. And a system that rewarded performance while abandoning failure quickly. None of these elements alone would have created a superpower. Together, they formed an engine of development unlike anything the world had seen before. This is also why copying China's model has proven so difficult. Many countries attempted industrial policy. Many built factories. Many attracted foreign investment. But without capable institutions, long-term coordination, disciplined capital, skilled labor, and cultural buy-in, the results fell short. Growth stalled. Corruption rose. Projects failed. China succeeded not because it followed a single policy, but because every part of its system reinforced the others. Culture supported education. Education supported industry. Industry justified infrastructure. Infrastructure enabled exports. Exports funded more investment. Round and round it went. A self-reinforcing cycle of development. And as that cycle accelerated, China moved beyond being the world's factory into becoming a technological and economic leader in its own right. Today, the country sits at the center of global supply chains. It shapes commodity markets. It influences trade flows. It drives innovation in multiple industries. Its economic decisions ripple across continents. This is what it means to be a superpower in the modern world. Not just military strength, but productive capacity, technological depth, financial scale, and global integration. China didn't become powerful overnight. It built power patiently, brick by brick, factory by factory, skill by skill, decade by decade. From the ruins of poverty to the center of the global economy. Not through luck, not through chance, but through strategy, discipline, and relentless execution. China's rise is one of the greatest economic transformations in human history, and it permanently changed how the world works. The story of how China became the next economic superpower isn't just about one country's success. It's a lesson in how systems, culture, and long-term thinking can reshape the destiny of entire nations.